Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
And now please join me in welcoming our speaker, Ronald.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronald White, and I'm an alcoholic. I love this little step up here. It makes me feel tall. Anybody who knows my story knows how important that is to me. I want to thank Tony for asking me to come out and share. I want to welcome any newcomer who might be here present in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to welcome you to the land of the living. I'd like to let you know that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works. I know that it works because I've been clean and sober one day at a time since July the 14th of 1986. And for that, I'll always be grateful to God for giving me this gift. I am going to be speaking very fast and very hard this morning because I have a lot to share about what God has done for me in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I only got about 40 minutes to share. I got about an hour's worth of sharing to do. So I'm going to try to talk real fast. I'll shortcut some of my good stuff. So if you guys have heard me before and I leave out the stuff about the panties and, you know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just completely made that up. But in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a chapter called Working with Others, chapter 7. That's the chapter that talks about the 12th step of recovery, that step which says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that chapter describes for me how I'm supposed to share with the new man or woman in a general way what I used to be like, what happened and what I'm like today. Now, it's quite fashionable to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous nowadays and hear people say, I'm not going to stay in no drunk-a-log. We all know how to drink. I want to share about the steps, about the work, about the process. And I think it is important that I talk about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, our planned program of action, our program for recovery. But you know something, I think it is probably even more vital, even more important that I share with you what I used to be like. Because there might be somebody looking at Ronald White today, and I think I look kind of nice. I'll describe it for the people on the tape. He's wearing a beautiful black suit with a resplendent red silk tie. His glasses don't have any tape on them. His shoes matching one another. You know, it's just like, wow. Somebody might look at me this morning and be fooled, be thinking, he don't look like no drunk. Look at him. He looks like a preacher or a teacher, a professor, you know, somebody from the Screen Actors Guild. They asked to just come out here and read a script, you know, or something like that. Somebody might be fooled by the exterior. I dress up when I speak at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous because I had a sponsor early on who told me if I ever had the privilege of being able to share what God has done for me, that I should at least look sober. That there might be somebody new in the room that the only thing they might remember is what the speaker looked like. I remember when I was new, it was hard to focus for a whole hour on anything, and I might only catch snatches, but I did remember what he looked like, and that he was smiling, that he seemed to be at peace with himself, that he looked like his life had been back in order. And so I like to do that, but I know this is not an outside job. And there might be somebody who thinks, well, how can I identify with him? Look at him. He's all dressed up. My life's in tatters. He must be somebody important. They ask him to share, right? People coming up to him at the beginning and hugging, to greeting him. I'm not like that. I am lost and I'm alone. I'm sitting in an abandoned apartment or in a recovery home. I'm sitting, nobody wants to see me coming nowhere. And you might think that I'm special, that that you can't do what I have done, what God has done for me, he won't do for you. If you don't know what I used to be like, you might be fooled. And so I like to share so that the identification that takes place when one alcoholic shares with another, that nobody else can feel what I felt other than another alcoholic. And so I like to share with you that when I arrived on the doorstep of Alcoholics Anonymous on the morning of July the 14th of 1986, I wasn't wearing no nice fancy suit. I was standing in the lobby of a joint called the Harbor Light Center, a place run by the Salvation Army located on the Nickel, 5th Street, the middle of Skid Row in downtown LA. The Harbor Light Center was an all-men's alcoholic recovery center housing 150 beds for alcoholic men. I'm standing in this lobby being interviewed, and I'm not talking about no job interview, y'all. I'm talking about one of those intake interviews they're giving you to see if they're going to give you that bed. And the counselor, his name was George, and George was an old black guy with a rumpled brown suit on with a brown fedora kind of like tilted rakishly on his head, right? And he had this folder in his hand asking me those complex questions they ask you, right? To see if you're going to get a bed. He was like, Mr. White, how much do you drink? And I remember I mumbled my answer. And he asked me something else, and I mumbled another answer. And I remember as I'm mumbling these answers out to him, I'm staring down at these dirty, holy tennis shoes that I'm wearing. I'm looking at these tennis shoes, y'all, because it felt like my chin was stapled to my chest, because I was so ashamed of being there that I couldn't even look him in the eye. And I'm mumbling my answers, and my eyes traveled up from these dirty tennis shoes I'm wearing up to these gray corduroy pants I have on. And the pants are real dusty and dirty because I've been on a run for 4 or 5 days and didn't bother to change. And so the pants were real filthy. If I'd hit them too hard, a cloud of smoke would have filled the lobby. And I had a T-shirt that was matching those pants, gray, and it wasn't supposed to match. It was supposed to be white, but you know how it is when you one of us. And so it was slick and greasy and oily. And I had a big black overcoat on because I didn't want you to see how malnourished I'd become. You know how when I drink, I don't eat. So imagine me 40 or 50 pounds lighter than I am today. I look like a skeleton. So I wore this coat everywhere I went, like you wouldn't notice the coat. I told you it was July in LA. And not no fancy London fog or cashmere. I'm talking about one of those Chester the Molester looking coats, right? Right where you, right? You know, just like, you know. And I was just filthy. I had stopped bathing. I'm wearing the same drawers, the same underwear that I've been wearing for about a month. You know how they're just nasty and just caked. If you would just smell me, I cannot even imagine the stench that I had on me. You know when it's coming out your pores and you haven't bathed. I don't even see how the man could stand in the same room as me. If you get a chance to hug me at the end of this meeting or shake my hand, I want you to take a whiff. Wearing a fine little fragrance by Gucci, right? Yeah, something called Guilty. Guilty, right? If you would smell, I smell guilty, right? You know, that's the way I smelled that morning, right? You know, so wasn't nothing by Gucci. And I was not laughing like I am this morning. There was nothing funny about the way that I felt. I never had any dreams nor aspirations at age 31 showing up at the Harbor Light Center begging them for a bed. It wasn't one of the top 10 goals in my life to become a drunk, and I felt hopeless, and I felt helpless. Because you see, I never even intended to ever drink alcohol because one of the first resentments I had in my life was against my father, because my father was a drunk. My father was what we call back in the day a wino. He used to love to drink a fine little beverage called Ripple. Some people may be old enough to remember that. Real popular back in the 50s and in the 60s. I was raised in South Central Los Angeles, and my mother and father raised me in there. I have 5 brothers, 6 boys in our family. And my father would get paid on Friday, and he never seemed to be able to make it home until Sunday. And when he made it home, he was always drunk, and he always had that smell on him. And my mother would greet him at the doorway, and she would ask him, "Ralph, what happened to you? What happened? We've got all these boys to feed, and you could not bring home a dime." And I remember vividly, as if it were yesterday, he would mumble something you couldn't understand, or he would curse my mother out like she had done something wrong. And when he cussed my mother out, he made her cry. And when he made my mother cry, I looked at him with hatred. I hated him for being so weak. I hated him for being such a punk. I hated him for not loving us enough to bring home the money. I hated him for being an alcoholic. And so I swore the first resentment I had in my life was against my father for being an alcoholic. And behind that resentment, I drank nothing for the first 18 years of my life. But you know something? Even while growing up, not drinking, I had what I've come to know as the ism of alcoholism. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the front portion of our book, they have something called the doctor's opinion, where the doctor, Dr. Silkworth, who worked with the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote some interesting things they've included in our book. He said he noticed from studying these drunks at his hospital, they had certain things in common. One of the things he said was that they seemed to have what he called an allergic reaction to alcohol, that they seemed to crave more after they had the first one. But that wasn't what really interested me when I first read the doctor's opinion, because I told y'all I didn't drink for the first 18 years of my life. But he said something else. He said these alcoholic men and women, when not drinking, seem to suffer from feelings of being irritable, restless, and discontent, kind of not at ease in their skin, dis-eased. And I identified with that. Because you see, even before I started drinking, I've always felt dis-ease. I've always felt different than everyone else. I've always felt apart from rather than a part of. I've always felt not always less than, but sometimes better than, but never just the same. I've always hated being so damn short. Now, I know that's not a big deal to anybody else in the room other than the other short guys. And usually tall ladies tell me they can identify with this, because as I grew up, I felt like I was, you know, that when I would go to the dance, all of you guys were always taller than me, all you women. And I felt like I was just, could not even ask you to dance. I've always felt like I was just less than everybody else because of my height. I know it's not a big deal. I'm 5'4½". That's right, a half. And I will carry that with me. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, right? You know, I've always had that about my height. But not only was I short, I was small. I was little. And that wasn't cool in my neighborhood where I grew up in Watts, because all the boys judged each other's self-worth by how well they played sports. And I wasn't good at sports. I couldn't play baseball or football or basketball. I would always get picked last on the sports teams. It always made me feel less than. I always hated being so black. And I don't mean being black, y'all, but damn it, so black. Even black people discriminated against me. You know, it was just like, you know, this may have been my perception, but I thought the lighter your skin was, the prettier you were, the more handsome you was. And I never wanted to be white. I just wanted to be high yellow. You know, with good hair, right, as they say, right? Yeah. I've hated wearing glasses. I've worn glasses since the 2nd grade, and they call me those names, you know, Four Eyes, Poindexter, Mr. Peabody, the Professor. You know, shoot, I needed a drink, shoot, when I was growing up, man, to help me escape from the prison of my thinking. But I couldn't drink because I didn't want to become my father, but I had to find something. I've always had to find something to help me fix this dis-ease and discomfort in my spirit. And the thing I found while I was growing up were books. I became addicted to reading. Libraries became my sanctuary because, you see, when I read, I escaped. And I was no longer on 108th and Central in Watts. I was somewhere in Europe or in Paris. I used to love spy novels because I would become the hero in all of these books. And I would be somebody who was tall, dark, and handsome. Somebody who would save the world, get the girl at the end of the story. I would know karate. Hi! Look at that. No lessons, right? You know, I'm sorry. And this made me feel good about myself. But you know something? Everything I've ever latched on to that's helped me escape from who, where, and what I am, after a while of using it, it seems to not have the same effect. And I require more. My disease is progressive, and it centers in my thinking. And after a while of reading those books, they didn't help me get out of myself the same way. And I needed something else, and I discovered comic books because the stories were shorter and quicker, and the heroes were bigger and stronger. And I became a superhero. I would go in my mother's closet, and I would tie a towel around my neck, and I would go out on 108th Street. I don't know if y'all know anything about Watts in the 60s. One of the toughest, roughest, most dangerous cities in the world. And imagine me with a towel around my neck, running down the street at full speed, right? You know, arms stretched out. But you see, when I put on that towel, when I put on that cape, I felt no fear. Because it made me feel strong. It made me feel heroic. It made me feel powerful. And even back then, lack of power was my dilemma, and I was willing to go to any length to feel the sense of power. Progressive disease. Read those comic books didn't make me feel the same way after a few years, and I needed something else, and my family purchased a small little black and white television, and I fell in love with TV. This is the early 60s. They used to call me the human TV guide. I'm glued to the television, and my brother would play games when neighbors would come over. They would just yell out, "Ronnie, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. And I said, 8 o'clock, Channel 2 is Gunsmoke, Channel 4 is Mannix, Channel 5 is Petticoat Junction, Channel 7 is Donna Reed. Right? Some of our younger members look puzzled when I start saying the names of those shows. I need to let you know, these were the TV shows I was reared on, that were on when I was young. I knew whatever was on any channel, any time of the day, any day of the week. I thank God they didn't have cable. I was there was one television show that I gravitated to that later became one of the guiding forces in my life. Some of you guys remember this show. It was a show called Perry Mason. Perry Mason was a criminal defense attorney played by an actor named Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr was one of the handsomest white boys I'd ever seen on television. He was tall, broad-shouldered, jet black hair, slick back, beautiful black suits I think they were black. It was black and white television, so, you know, it was just like, but he had these beautiful dark suits on, and he'd walk around the courtroom with a command and a presence about him. And I don't know if you remember Raymond Burr's eyes. He had these dark, piercing eyes, and he'd always have a client who was in peril, and they'd get near the end of the episode, and his client was about to go down. They'd have that last witness, and Perry couldn't get it, and his private eye, Paul Drake, would run in the back door with a little slip of paper and hand it to Perry, and Perry would read the note, and he'd square his shoulder, and the witness would get nervous and start to sweat, and Perry wasn't having it. He would close in, he would just say, "Isn't it true?" Yes, yes! Right. Somebody from the back of the courtroom would jump up. "I did it." What? It was amazing, right? Alcoholic's dream, right? You know. That's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Perry Mason because Perry had power. So I grew up wanting to be Perry Mason. I wanted to be a lawyer. As I came through school, I was a straight-A student because my addiction to reading made me ready-made for school. Most articulate kid in all my classes, best reader, always got called on by the teacher. All that television and movies and other things that I would read, they made me able to write essays because I had a vivid imagination. And so I'm this honor roll student coming through school. I'm at a school in South Central LA called Locke High School. In my senior year, I'm elected my senior class president. I'm a member of a world-famous marching band called the Locke High Marching Saints. I'm playing trombone, marching in the front rank of the band, the front line, and we're in the Rose Parade in Hawaii at the Aloha Parade. A few of us in that band formed a jazz band that went to the Hollywood Bowl for the Battle of the Bands, and we won sweepstakes as the top jazz band in the nation. I got accepted to go to college on a full academic scholarship at Loyola University. I'm this kid at a school in South Central, and I'm going to Loyola on a full ticket, right? A full scholarship. It sounds like my life was full, right? Sound like I had some accomplishments, some things to be proud of, some gifts, some blessings. But you know something? I'm an alcoholic in waiting. Remember, I haven't even drank yet, but I've got the ism. Because you see, I am never satisfied with that which I have because I'm too busy looking at what you have. The grass always looks greener on the other side. It seems like anything I've ever strived to achieve, once I get it, it doesn't have the effect I thought it was going to have. Or if it did, I get tired of it real fast. And by my nature, I am irritable, restless, and discontent. Did not want to be a bookworm. I wanted to be one of those athletes scoring touchdowns, getting their ego fed, having cheerleaders cheer for them. Nobody ever came in science class, yes, Ronald, that's the right answer, right? I know I got praise. I know people patted me on my back. I know I must have been told I was all right, that I was smart, but for some reason, it didn't feel the same way as when people praise you. When I graduated from high school, my class gave a beach party to celebrate our graduation, and I'm walking along the beach during this beach party, and it was at night, and I saw a guy and a girl huddled underneath a blanket, and I looked, and the blanket was moving. And I listened, and I heard the girl say, "Ooh." I'm sorry, I got lost for a second. And I said I wanted to get underneath a blanket. But everybody knows I'm the professor, and the professor doesn't get underneath blankets. And somebody was passing around something. I wish I remember what it was because it became my first drink. It was either some Tyrolia or some Spinata, high-class stuff. Because you see, by now, my ego told me I could take a drink and I'd never become my father. Because you see, my father was a high school dropout. I'm going to college on a full scholarship. I'm smarter than him. My thinking told me I could take a drink and I'd never become him because he was a janitor, a custodian. I'm going to be the next Perry Mason. I'm better than him. And so my thinking, my ego told me I could drink and I'd never become a drunk. And so I drank. And in the beginning, alcohol did for me everything that I needed for it to do. It made me feel taller. It made me feel bigger. It made me feel lighter. It made me feel cool. All of a sudden, the kid who was one of the original nerds, who could not even converse with anybody, socialize with anybody, could not even ask a girl to dance because I'm so afraid of rejection that I won't even ask you because I know the answer is going to be no. And I will be ridiculed by everybody once they see me walking back across the floor and they're laughing at me. But when I started to drink, man, it freed me from the prison of my thinking. And it made me have the ability to do, say, and try anything. I'm a black kid on a college campus. I'm the president of the Black Student Union. I'm going to all the beer busts and the panty raids. We're streaking. Well, I wasn't streaking. I don't know if you guys remember what streaking was, but I'm much too, well, never mind. I need to let you know that alcohol made me feel like I was a part of life at last. But unfortunately, I told you the disease I suffer from is progressive in nature. After a little while, after a year or two of drinking, I didn't want to just drink at the parties on the weekends. I wanted to feel good on Monday, too. And I wanted to feel that way on Tuesday and on Wednesday. Now I'm drinking every day. Daily drinking starts doing some things to you because My grades started slipping because you have to go to class to keep your grades up. And if you're drinking every day and all night, you start to miss class. So now I start cheating on my exams. My spirit started getting real sick. I started plagiarizing my term papers. Hell, I started buying term papers from these services that used to sell them. My character started to change. I didn't connect this up with my drinking because, after all, that's the thing that freed me. Respecting the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, you need to know that I'm a garbage can, that when I start drinking, I can't stop from doing anything. And so as I progressed through college, I experimented with all kinds of different things because of the disease of alcoholism. Somehow, by the grace of God, I got out of college in 4 years and graduated on time, got accepted to go to law school, pursuing Perry Mason. Went to law school at a school in San Francisco called Hastings College of the Law. I didn't know at the time it was one of the most prestigious law schools in the country. But all I'm doing is doing a geographic. I'm running away from LA because my drinking had started to be a problem, and I knew this, knew I couldn't get through law school if I didn't leave LA. You don't need to go to San Francisco if you're an alcoholic, because my disease blossomed there. Somehow I went to summer school after my first year of law school and summer school after my second year of law school, and I graduated from law school early in 2.5 years, sooner than any of my classmates. I'm 23 years old. They have a test you got to take to be a lawyer called the bar exam, and they're giving this test before my class walks across the stage in June. And I take this test in February of 1979. I've just turned 24. And the bar results come out on the day of my graduation. Before I even walk across the stage, I learned I've passed the bar, and at age 24, I'm one of the youngest black attorneys ever licensed to practice law in the state of California. And I know this is confirmation that everything I'm doing is the way you're supposed to live. This is the way you're supposed to drink. This is the way you're supposed to act. And I know by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm the next Perry Mason. Isn't it true? I need to let you know that because of the progression of the disease of alcoholism, by the time I was 30, I wasn't a millionaire. In fact, I didn't even have a bank account. I didn't have a house on the hill or a condominium or a mansion. I'm living back at home with my mother sleeping on her floor. I didn't have a job for a law firm on Wilshire and Westwood. The only job I had was carrying out the trash and watering the lawn for a 21-year-old dope dealer who lived across the street from my mother's house. I cannot even imagine the shame and degradation that my mother felt looking at this son she had just been so proud of 5 years before, and I am disgracing not only myself, but my family behind the disease of alcoholism. Alcohol is no respecter of intellect. Alcohol doesn't care if you graduated from law school or dropped out from high school. Alcohol doesn't care if you grew up in Westwood or in Watts. Alcohol does not care if you're black or if you're white. Doesn't care if you're a man or if you're a woman. Alcohol is an equal opportunity ass kicker. Suffer from the disease that I suffer from, that is, first of all, physical in nature. Something happens to me that transforms me when I have one drink of anything in any form. A craving takes place in my body that makes getting the next one more important than anything else in my life. The mother that raised me and my brothers by herself when she put that drunk of a father out when I was 9, who worked cooking and cleaning for other people's families so that she could raise 6 boys and never let us go hungry, who went to night school to get a high school diploma while raising us, got 2 jobs, stayed in night school to get a college diploma to help her boys. That mother, the one I love more than life, the one that I was so proud of when she graduated from college and got a job for Prudential Insurance Company. I stole a gold watch they gave her at that job to get a drink. I love my mother more than anything. I would tell people I would die for my mother. Let me have a drink. The craving knows nothing about love, nor trust, nor respect, nor relationships. Let me have a drink. But that's not the worst part of my illness, because you see, the solution is don't take the first one, Ronald, but there is something about my thinking that is unlike that of a normal person. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the chapter called More About Alcoholism, chapter 3, it's described as an obsession, a thought that constantly whispers to me, this time it's going to be different, Ronald. Don't always say it like that. Sometimes say, Ronald, if you just change what you drink, if you just change where you drink, if you just change who you drink with, if you just put your money in money orders and mail it back to yourself, give your money to your mother to hold for you. These are the plans I would make before I got started to protect me from me. What is that but insanity? Never being able to accept the fact that my body can't do it because my mind tells me I can. And until I could address the third part of my illness, that dis-ease of my spirit that I'm constantly seeking ease and comfort for, I am doomed to repeat that, they call it in the book, that desperate experiment of having the first one. On July the 13th of 1986, a guy tried to beat me to death in front of my mother. I had stolen some money from him. My mother had just gotten home from church on a Sunday, and I decided I would take this wolf in my mother's house to try to get out of this whooping I knew I had coming. And he told me, Ronald, it's okay. We can just make credit arrangements and everything will be fine. And he takes me out on my mother's porch. And he proceeded to try to kick me and stomp me to death. And I felt like I was removed from my body watching this happen. And this guy, his name was Kenny. Kenny is kicking me and stomping me in my mother's front yard, and my mother walked out on the front porch, and I expected her to say, stop, stop, that's my baby. But my mother said nothing. This is the mother that did everything for me. And I look back, and Kenny is still kicking me and stomping me. And I look back at my mother, and she turned around, and she walked back in the house, and she closed the door. And it was at that moment that I experienced step one. The next day is when I went to the Harbor Light Center in the state I described to you at the beginning of this meeting, more dead than alive. And they gave me a bed. And I did nothing but eat and sleep for the next 7 days while they detoxed me. And then they started bringing me to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I started sitting in the front and listening like only a dying person could hear. I'd been to a recovery home twice in 1985. Went home on a pass after the first recovery home, and I saw my brothers playing dominoes and drinking Michelob. And I thought, well, Michelob never really did anything bad to me. The obsession. And I had a drink, and I was off to the races. I went back to that recovery home, and I went home on a pass, and the local dope dealer says, Ronald, you don't drink or use anything? You could sell this stuff for me. That experiment lasted 20 minutes. When I went to the Harbor Light Center, I didn't go home on no passes. I started coming to these meetings and listening to people share from podiums like this that I would come, and then I would come to. And then I would come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, the spiritual solution to my spiritual problem. They told me that I needed to find a power greater than myself that could stand in between me and that insane thought that would one day come again, that would whisper to me that, Ronald, this time it'll be different. And I knew that I would always succumb, and I needed a power that could restore me to sanity. And many of them said they called this power God. And when I heard that, I thought I was lost, because you see, I was raised in church by that mother. And I knew about God, and I had gone back to church to try to get sober, and I would always relapse. And I thought God didn't want to have nothing to do with me because of the animal that I had become, because of the people that I had burned, because of the lies that I had told, the promises I had broken. And I knew God had given up on me. And they told me, Ronald, who do you think has brought you to this place? Who do you think has been carrying you through all that madness that you've been doing? We think maybe you've been looking at God through somebody else's eyes, Ronald. We have a chapter for you in the big book. Chapter 4, it's a chapter called We Agnostics, the spiritual kindergarten. And they told me I needed to develop a personal relationship with this power. There is a line in that chapter that I love so much, and it says this: deep inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It says that he has sometimes been obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things. But it tells me that if I am willing to search fearlessly in myself, we believe it is there that he can be found. And I got hope. I've always looked for God in the sky, in a preacher, in my mother, and somebody who seems so much more godly, so much more spiritual than me, because after all, I know me. I know the way that I think. I know the way that I act. What God would want to reside in this animal? And they told me, Ronald, guess what? You have just piled so much garbage on top of the power that is already in you, but we have a prescription. We call them steps. If you take these steps, we promise you that you will uncover, discover, and discard the garbage you piled on the sunlight of your spirit. And then if you do this thing that we have promised to you, you will have an awakening, a spiritual awakening, as the result of these steps. After I've been in the Harbor Light Center for 130 days, they took me to a sober living home that they ran called Harmony Hall. Harmony Hall is where they start to transition the men back into real life, getting you your driver's license, social security card back. I've been an animal out there on the street. I had lost everything, thought I'd been disbarred. I'd been practicing law without a license, never paid my bar dues because I would drink up the money. And I thought when I got sober that the dream I had of being a lawyer had been lost. And I was just going to be satisfied with whatever work you guys could find for me. The first job that got me through that sober living was being a bookkeeper for a little old lady who had a nursing home. That might sound fancy. Let me tell you what I did. I would catch the bus to this lady's house, and she would sit me on a couch, grabbed a stack of her bills, handed them to me, took her checkbook, signed a bunch of blank checks. She handed that checkbook to me, and she said, Mr. White, I want you to pay all my bills, and I want you to balance my checkbook, and I'll be back in a couple of hours. And she left me alone in her house with a bunch of blank signed checks. And I'm 5 months sober, and I'm scared. When she came home 2 hours later, I was sitting in the same place where she left me, and I handed her bills, and they were sealed up with checks inside. And I gave her her checkbook back, and it was balanced, and there were no checks missing, and there was nothing missing in her house. And that lady paid me $40 a week to do that job. And when I put that $40 in my pocket and caught the bus back to Harmony Hall, I felt 10 feet tall. Because it had been a long time since anybody had trusted me. And I hadn't burned them. And I knew there was something about that spirit that had gotten so sick when I started drinking had changed, and I grew closer to the power. When I was sober a year and a half in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, sharing from podiums, talking about how the program works, keep coming back. You know, somebody approached me at the end of the meeting and says, Ronald, you talk about how you trust in God. Why don't you call up the state bar and find out what's happening with your bar card? Living in fear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I fear rejection so much that if I think the question is going to be bad, I won't even ask the question. Instead, I just disbar myself. They said, Ronald, trust in God. I called the state bar. They said, Mr. White, you've been suspended for non-payment of dues, $2,500. Pay your back dues and we'll give you your bar card back. $2,500 sounded like $25,000 at the time because I had a minimum wage job as a legal proofreader. But you know something? It's amazing how much money you could save when you're not drinking. I saved half of every paycheck for the next 6 months, and I wrote a check for $2,500 to the State Bar of California, and they gave me my bar card back. 3 months later, somebody in the fellowship, I hate y'all sometimes, y'all come up and y'all tell us the truth. Ronald, isn't it time for you to start looking for a job as a lawyer? Still living in fear, afraid of sending out that resume. You know when you got that gap on it, that 2-year gap, and I'm wondering, how can I put down Harbor Light, Harmony Hall? What law firm is going to want to hire me? They told me, Ronald, trust in God. First job I applied for was with the LA County Public Defender's Office. They were doing interviews. They had me in for an interview. And they got to the end of the interview, and this lawyer at the end of the table asked me, Mr. White, we've been looking at your resume, and we noticed you haven't been practicing law for 2 years. Why not? I said, sir, I'm an alcoholic. I did not intend on telling them that. It kind of slipped out. Y'all got me trained. I said, sir, I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for the last 2 years. They said, Mr. White, lawyers drink a lot. don't you think the stresses of this position might make you want to drink again? I said, sir, it was stressful when I was out there. I think God has prepared me to do this job. And they looked at me, God, who is that? Is that is that a reference? Right, you know, they don't know. That's my best reference. They said, we'll let you know your scores in 10 days, Mr. White, if you're on the waiting list, if we could hire you. I went home that afternoon not feeling real confident. They called me 3 hours later and said, we want you in for another interview, Mr. White, this Friday. I thought they probably want me to pee in a bottle. But I'm willing. I've been sober for 2 years. I'm willing. When I showed up that Friday, they had me see the head public defender of L.A. County at the time, a guy named Wilbur Littlefield. Mr. Littlefield sat me on a chair in his office and started walking around talking about what public defenders do for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm fidgeting on the couch waiting for the questions about alcohol like one of them witnesses in Perry Mason. And Mr. Littlefield just stops talking, and he gives me this funny look. And he walked over to the couch where I sat, and he held out his hand to me, and he says, Ron, we'd be proud to have you join our office. I like to remember the way that I felt when he said that. Didn't he know just 2 years before I was sleeping on my mother's floor, stealing the shoes out her closet, cooking plates for people around the neighborhood to get a drink? What is that but a miracle? Alcoholics Anonymous takes broken up pieces of men and women, working with the guidance of a loving God who works through the unselfish men and women who toil in this fellowship, and we put the pieces back together again. It was as if each man and woman who sits in this room today were standing in the lobby of the Harbor Light Center when I arrived there more dead than alive, with my chin on my chest, too ashamed to look you in the face, and you guys walked up to me and you put your hand underneath my chin and you lifted up my head. And even more than that, you wrap your arms around me. As dirty and as filthy and as nasty as I was, you wrap your arms around me and you literally love me back to life. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is not about who's got the best pitch from the podium, who's got the nicest looking suits, who's got the biggest car in the parking lot, who's got the biggest bank account, who's got the most babies. Alcoholics Anonymous is about gaining access to the power. The power that I've come to know that is so great, so good, so forgiving, so loving that it can do anything but fail. I've gone over my time and I'm gonna take one more minute to share 4 quick things with you about what it's like today. 21 years ago, February 8th of 1991, I was standing in the delivery room of Kaiser Hospital with a pair of scissors in my hand, cutting the umbilical cord on my son, Ronald Jr. No ego. Thing number 2, 3 months later, I married the mother of my son. May not be a big deal to nobody else in this room, but the only relationship I had with a woman when I was drinking was I was a trick. And a woman actually wanted to share her life with me. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. Thing number 3. About 14, 15 years ago, I found myself standing on the lawn of the White House in Washington, D.C., having been invited there by the President of the United States because he heard about the work I was doing in my community as a public defender, and they wanted my input on a federal crime bill they were putting together. Standing on the lawn of the White House, hell, I was watering the lawn for the dope man. Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll leave you with this. In October or November of 1987, my mother was getting ready to go to church. On a Sunday morning, she walked out of her bedroom, dressed almost the same way she was that day that guy Kenny tried to beat me to death. And she steps in the doorway of her living room, and she stops, and she looks around her living room, and she starts crying. She starts crying because it's a bunch of drunks sitting up in her living room. Each one of the drunks who sat in her living room that morning were holding a copy of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous in their hand. because my brother and I, who had gotten sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, had been able to start a big book workshop in the same house where we tried to drink my mother to death. And the tears she cried that morning were tears of joy for what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous had done for her and her boys. Yesterday, I sat with my mother and some family members as my children gave me a cake for my 26th year of sobriety, and I was able to see my mother cry tears of joy again. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for letting me share.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.